How's it going, folks? This is Mike, and it's getting close to Halloween, so I thought I'd do a little bit of a countdown with the films based on the writings of Edgar Allan Poe, directed by Roger Corman at American International Studios between 1960 and 1965. Corman directed 7 films based on the writings of Poe, all of them but one starring Vincent Price. And the first one was in 1960, The Fall of the House of Usher, sometimes known just as House of Usher. And a great little movie. It was made on a very low budget, something like $300,000, made in about 15 days. Very typical of American International Studios. They had been making films since the mid 1950s, low budget, black and white, quickly made films that were mainly for the teenage drive-in trade. Films about juvenile delinquents, monsters, high schools, hot rods, all sorts of things. Now, a lot of these movies have been directed by Roger Corman. He was a master at making a good film quickly and cheaply. So in 1960, he wanted to try something a little bit different and sort of upgrade the product for himself and AIP. So he decided to do a film based on, this was a one-shot. It wasn't meant in the beginning to be a series of films. He just wanted to try doing his favorite Edgar Allan Poe story, The House of Usher. When he brought this idea to the heads of the studio, James Nicholson and Samuel Z. Arkoff said, well, we can't do this. There's no monster to show the kids. So Corman said, in this case, the house itself is going to be the monster. So they went ahead with it. Screenplay by Richard Matheson took the very short and very morbid story by Edgar Allan Poe and opened it up. In the story, it begins with a young man who is not named riding on a horse toward the house of Usher, which is sort of a desolate, creepy-looking place. And he is there to visit his old friend Roderick Usher, whom he had known years before when they were going to school together. Hadn't seen the guy in years. And Roderick has a sister named Madeline, who appears in the story only very briefly. Now, in the film version, they decided that they would have the young man, played by good-looking actor Mark Damon, approach the house so that he could see Madeline, the woman that he had known previously and that he was in love with, and he wanted to marry her. So he was not acquainted yet with Roderick Usher. Vincent Price, of course, plays Roderick Usher. He is a man who is suffering from a variety of illnesses, sensitivity to light, sensitivity to noise, and he's not able to eat very much food. And he is convinced that the house that he lives in, which is the family estate going back many, many generations, is so filled with evil, the evil that was committed by the various generations of Ushers, that the house itself is in a state of decay because of that ancient sin. And he also believes that his young sister, a beautiful girl played by actress Myrna Fahey, beautiful black-haired actress, that she is also suffering from an illness and that she cannot leave the house. So therefore she can't marry this guy. So Roderick is trying to get him to leave. Well, things get very crazy and very, very morbid. There's an air of morbidity about this film from start to finish, and it's beautifully done, beautifully shot by cinematographer Floyd Crosby, fantastic art direction by Daniel Haller, and it's amazing what they were able to do on such a little bit of money. It's filmed in Panavision, gorgeous color. Roger Corman had been inspired by the horror films coming out of Hammer Studios in England in the late 1950s, beginning with the remake of Dracula, the remake of Frankenstein, the remake of The Mummy. He wanted to do something kind of like these movies, but in his own way. He felt that the stories by Edgar Allan Poe were basically stories about what's going on in the subconscious mind. So he was not necessarily looking for realism. He wanted it to be, he wanted everything to be done on sets as much as possible. The only shot in this film that was done on location was at the very beginning. When Mark Damon is riding in his horse toward the house, he's going through this burned out landscape. There had been a fire in the Hollywood Hills very recently, so Roger Corman took his cameraman down there and just filmed Mark Damon going through the burned out landscape. It looks very creepy. But when he approaches the House of Usher, it's this gigantic matte painting. So you have the real sort of segueing into the unreal very quickly. It's a beautifully shot film, very well done. And I don't want to give away too much of the plot, but I will say this. because I know a lot of you probably still haven't seen this, but there's really nothing supernatural going on in the story. It has something about the plot concerns fear of being buried alive. Okay, and that's a theme that Corman will use in many of the other Edgar Allan Poe films. Screenplay by Richard Matheson is kind of repeated in some of the other films, just as they use some of the sets from the original, the first film, House of Usher, in some of the other films. So Corman was very good at getting his money's worth. He would use things again and again. So you see a lot of repetition in these films. But the idea is that there's something so evil and so decayed about the blood of this family that there is also the condition known as catalepsy. People who appear to be dead that are actually alive. So I won't tell you any more than that. It is a very impressive movie, and I think a lot of people who like gothic horror films, and certainly if you like the Hammer films from the 1950s and 60s, you will actually appreciate this, I think. So the film was a big success, according to what I read in this fantastic little book called The Poe Cinema, a critical filmography by Don G. Smith. I got a lot of my information from this. American International, even when the film was finished, they weren't quite sure what they had, so they went ahead and released it instead of a single feature, which is what Corman wanted to do originally. They released it as a double feature, but it became so successful on its own, made a lot of money, and got a lot of critical, very positive critical response as well. So that made them decide to do another one. So Vincent Price would come back the following year to work with Roger Corman in the second Poe adaptation, The Pit and the Pendulum. Now, actor Mark Damon was not terribly well known at the time, but he in the 1960s, he would relocate to Italy and live there for many years, becoming an incredibly successful actor in a lot of spaghetti westerns, made over 50 films, and he also became a producer during that time. He became a producer and distributor of foreign films for the international market. And he's now in his 80s, and I think he's still in the business. I could be wrong about that, but he has a long list of credits both as an actor and a producer. And Myrna Fahey, unfortunately, even though she was a beautiful young actress and she had a certain amount of success on television during the 1960s, she would die very young at the age of 34 sometime in the 1970s. So that's very sad to know. The only other actor in the film, 4 characters in the film, the other actor was character actor Harry Ellerby, who played the manservant. And as I said, it's a great success, and it's certainly worth seeing. Okay, so I guess that's all I want to say. And I will come back and talk to you later, hopefully, unless I get really lazy, about the next film, The Pit and the Pendulum. Thanks for watching.